No, I get it. I'm complying. I'm under arrest. It's fine. I'm not resisting. I'm complying. No, do what you have to do. I get it. Yes. Yes. No, I understand. That's what you think. You think I've broken the law. I disagree, but do what you have to do. I'm not resisting. Yes. No, it's fine. I'm fully compliant. Let's go. Let's do what you need to do. Take me to the paddy wagon. Take me down to the station. That's fine. I'm perfectly well complying. I'm under arrest. I get it. So that was all very dramatic. What on earth is going on? This is a PSA for how to be arrested, but only under certain circumstances. I've had experience with arrest. Never on the receiving end, mind you. I've never been arrested myself. But I have arrested many people over many years as a mall cop or a security guard, something I've mentioned increasingly on the podcast. Usually just for minor crimes, trespass was the most common thing. You'd ask people to leave the shopping centre and they'd refuse to. Or second most common, and related to the first, was shop stealing. That was very common. Assaults, now and again, minor violence of that sort, weapons involved, that kind of thing. So anyway, I've arrested people, but I've never arrested anyone for what they've said. And I was insulted a lot and called all sorts of horrible names. That's what you get as a security guard in certain places. Now, putting all of that aside, there are better and worse ways to get arrested. Now, yes, I know. Many such PSAs like this have been done before. Sam Harris has done, half a podcast on how to get arrested. And he's all about just comply. And I completely agree with all of that, but I want to add something. And only in certain circumstances, and only in certain countries like Australia and the UK. This doesn't come up in America for reasons that will become obvious quite shortly. Getting arrested is stressful, and so trying to remember what to do under duress can be hard. I get that. So it's about practice, being ready, because I'm ready now. And I never thought I could possibly get arrested, but actually, things have changed. Of course, this is not legal advice. You should speak to a lawyer who's probably going to tell you, don't do what that silly podcaster is telling you what to do. In almost all jurisdictions, you have the right to remain silent, so perhaps do that. I'm speaking for myself here. And for me, I'd waive that right to silence, but just in this particular case, you'll see why in a moment. Then you can decide for yourself. I should say, again, this is an Australian issue and a New Zealand issue and a United Kingdom issue, so far as I can tell. But again, it's a PSA which doesn't constitute legal advice. So you may have heard of the lesbian nana saga. This is where a young girl in distress has referred to a female police officer as looking like her lesbian nana. She was then arrested for homophobic remarks, even though there's nothing homophobic about being compared to a lesbian nana. Why? You look like a lesbian. That's not homophobic. If someone said I looked a little bit gay, fair enough. I'm not straight. Okay, I get it. It's not hate speech. It's nothing. It's just a label. Okay. In Australia, we've had recently people being arrested for posts on Facebook, again, for things they said. They weren't inciting violence. They weren't trying to drum up a mob of people to go and attack someone. It was nothing like that. They were disagreeing with the policies of the government, that's all, airing their grievances, so to speak, in a public forum, and arrested for it. This happened more than once in Australia. It was disgraceful. It was an abrogation of free speech which we don't really have in Australia. We just don't have it. I shouldn't say really have it. We just don't have it. There's a whole bunch of laws that curtail the capacity to say whatever you like. It's only speech that you disagree with that needs to be protected. Speech that everyone agrees with doesn't need protection because, by definition, everyone's just able to say it because it's something we all agree on. It's the disagreeable stuff that needs to have protections. And this is why I'm a great supporter of the First Amendment in the United States. I think that is a very useful heuristic, putting aside all of my concerns about enshrining certain things forever in law. But that one, I'll give it a pass. So anyway, it's a real possibility in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, And certain other places, of course, that are far worse, like China, for just saying stuff. Now, in China, I wouldn't suggest doing this. I'm talking about nations in the Western tradition, nations that have free access to social media, for example, nations with a reasonably robust mainstream media, nations that otherwise cleave in the direction of free speech without having it ideally like the United States, or more ideally. So if you're just saying stuff all the time, like I do, there is actually a real possibility that something you've said over hundreds of hours of public content online, that someone could find something, especially in the future, given the way that regulations and laws continue to be enacted. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm not a pessimist. I hope that these things won't happen. I have a certain amount of confidence, if you like, that the institutions in Australia would prevent this, but there have been mistakes made in the past already, enshrined there in law, and who knows if more of these won't happen. Who knows if people won't go trolling through tweets and Facebook posts and my podcasts, as sort of mundane and vanilla as they are in terms of contentious issues. Things could be found. Things could be found and twisted, and I could be arrested for what I have said. And so could many people if they decided they didn't like you. So I'm personally worried about this. I could go to a jurisdiction where they've decided that something I've posted at some point in the past means I'm worthy of arrest in that particular jurisdiction. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Who knows how things work? Posting stuff objecting to COVID policies has caused people to be arrested. Saying stuff that could be considered hate speech, like "you look like my lesbian nana," has caused people to be arrested under violent circumstances. So let's try and avoid the violence, okay? If the police are going to initiate violence against you, don't be violent back. That's the first thing. Comply, comply, comply. However, in certain circumstances, waive your right to silence. And I think this is one area where you can. So as I began this unusual podcast, I put my hands behind my back and I complied. Don't object. Don't resist. Do nothing like that. But do say some things with your hands behind your back as they put the handcuffs on, knowing full well they're recording with their body cams these days. And perhaps if you're sufficiently prepared, like I guess I would be sitting here with my camera, if I knew the police were coming, if they'd informed me, if the knock came on the door, I could start my camera very quickly and I could record things as well. I could get recorded in front of this very camera. I could have my microphones running and that kind of thing. Many people have microphones, they have mobile phones. Just switch it on so that you're heard, so that there's a recording of what's going on. So once you've begun everything, to cool everything down from these police who are arresting you for a free speech offence, for a speech offence, for a hate speech offence, whatever it happens to be. You've just said something or posted something, and you've said, I'm complying, I'm not resisting, everything that I said at the beginning, at the outset of this podcast. Then, if you can remember, say something like the following, because I'm trying to commit the following to memory, and I think I've got it relatively down pat. I'm going to read the ideal version, but I think I could basically say something like this. Were I arrested for something I'd posted in the past? I would say something like, because they'd probably come to my house, right? They'd want to find me at home. They know that I'm sitting here making podcasts, so why not come here? They're not going to try and get me in the street. They will come to my address, and I would let them in. I would comply with the law. I'd comply with every single legal requirement. But then I would go on to say, once I've complied, once the handcuffs are on, because there's going to be some distance between, my home and where the paddy wagon, the police vehicle where I get put into, is, and then there'll be some distance for them to drive to the police station. Then I'll have some time at the police station, all of which is time where I could be talking to the officers, and I would talk to the officers, and I would be saying stuff like this, and I have more than enough time to rattle off all of these points. And I'd say something like this. Okay, take me away. No, I get it. But the fact is, you do look like a lesbian nana. Or, it is the case that X, whatever it happens to be. It is the case that the New South Wales government policies on COVID are ridiculous. I don't agree with them. The fact is that what I said is my honestly held opinion. These were just words that I said. It is the case. repeat the thing. It is the case, repeat the thing. Just keep saying the thing over and over again. I mean, you've already committed the crime, so to speak, so why not just keep saying it? Are you going to be charged multiple times for the same crime? Maybe you can be. Again, consult a lawyer. But then I would continue to say to the police officers. Now, this is going to become like the Streisand effect. No one has much heard what I have said so far. My podcast has pretty small time, but there's been many cases like this where people have been arrested for free speech offences, and all of them appear to have gone viral. Not because I'm going to make it go viral, I would never do such a thing. But now, like all those other cases, this one will go viral. Because of what you are doing right now, it's going to go viral. And so what I have said, not heard so far by very many people, will now be heard by very many people. It'll be heard far and wide. And so you, yourselves, dear officers of the constabulary, you too will go viral, and you will be on the wrong side of history, and this will go to court. So yep, arrest me and take me away, and we'll have our day in court. And what I said will be said there too, and reported in the media, and your names will be published alongside mine, and people will decide who is the real criminal here. As famous as I may become for going viral, for having said the wrong thing, your names too, officers, will be in the media. You will go famous for having arrested someone for merely saying something when there are genuine crimes going on in the form of assaults and murders and so on, and you're not doing those things, you're not preventing those things, you're not out helping the community as you should be. So off we go, if that's what you still want, if I haven't convinced you yet, and we'll see how the court case goes and what the court of public opinion thinks and what social media thinks, not merely of me, but of you personally as well. Okay, so that's what I would say. That's end quote, so to speak. It's a lot to remember, but you can remember to say something like that. As a podcaster, I absolutely know that I would say something like that, and I would hope that the humanity and reasonableness of the police would make them second guess themselves, so that before they even got to the vehicle, they'd take the handcuffs off and go, okay, look, this is a warning, please don't say it again. And I would say, okay, no worries, I'll never say it again, and I'm sorry for my mistake, thank you so much. And, we'd go back to our business. And then I'd be petitioning politicians about what happened. I would be asking people to change the law. As I do in my own little way here, I rail against these ridiculous laws. In the case of the lesbian Nana, absolute abrogation of community policing, of the Peel principles, of everything that is supposed to be what policing is about. That 16-year-old distressed girl should not have been placed through that, because there are other things to consider other than the hurt feelings of the officer. In that case, everyone was distressed and no one had the presence of mind to make a better argument than what was made. Of course, I understand that. And perhaps no argument would have been effective. This was 7 police officers arresting a 16-year-old girl. That's excessive force by any metric, especially in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom. So that's a special case. The people there, the citizens there that were being arrested, they were in genuine distress. If I was arrested, I wouldn't be in that much distress because I'm not a relatively helpless 16-year-old girl in the face of 7 large police officers. But for me, and for you perhaps, basically if you can get that point across, maybe, just maybe, the arrest won't go ahead and charges won't be laid, and importantly, things won't escalate, perhaps, because who knows? Like you watch some of this footage that's coming out of Britain, which appears to be terrible on this, worse even than Australia. Australia is terrible, especially the state of Victoria. It seems like the hurt feelings of British police and Victorian police are being elevated above the very real mental anguish and fragility of children. The entire premise is the officer had her feelings hurt by being compared to a lesbian Nana. So hurt feelings are the thing that are being elevated here. That it's hate speech and you shouldn't be committing hate speech. But then what are the police doing in arresting the child and in saying they don't care that she's autistic? That at one point the mother said she's autistic, this is why she's hitting herself in the face when she's being arrested, because she's autistic. She's clearly more distressed than the average person would be under those circumstances. Far more distressed. And so isn't that some sort of crime? So there has to be some I don't know, set of standards or regulations the police normally would be conforming to in order to enact an arrest like that, but not so in this case. I don't know the law. Here I am complaining about what the law is. But this entire movement, this woke movement, the woke movement that's driving things like hate speech, it's supposed to be all a concern about mental health. But it's the mental health of police that are being elevated above the mental health of the citizenry. But mental health is about emotions, and the emotions of the police should be distilled out. The police are supposed to ignore their own personal emotions as far as possible and apply the law dispassionately. Was it dispassionate in this particular case? No, because it was the police officer themselves who had the hurt feeling. They shouldn't have a hurt feeling. The hurt feelings of police should be a distant second to the hurt feelings of the citizens that they're arresting. Hurt feelings shouldn't come into this, but if we're going to make these comparisons, that's the ridiculous comparison to make. That's it. Short one for today. I just wanted to make that PSA. But hopefully people get something out of it, and any other podcasters out there or people who have, like many of my followers, Twitter accounts, YouTube accounts. They say things in public, and increasingly there is this glacial, incremental push towards transgressions of free speech as being of prime importance to people, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be part of the legal system. This is a perversion of Enlightenment values, an absolute perversion of the tradition of criticism that I talk about. It shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be hate speech laws. End of. Full stop. Period. Credit to Jeremy Allen, my own personal live-in Douglas Murray. For much of the material in this episode, Jeremy has little to no social media presence except a kind of novelty Twitter account. You can see here at JEMJMCA. Worth a follow, as I encourage him to post more, even of his off-the-wall one-liners you'll find there. Jeremy is a polyglot linguist. He's a scholar with degrees in Asian and Korean studies, among other things, and is highly knowledgeable about history, geography, politics, and music, with an actual flair for comedy. In other words, all the things I'm not good at. In an upcoming, more lengthy episode, I'll be diving into some Korean and cultural analysis, among other things, all made possible only with Jeremy's help. Perhaps I can coax him on screen or on mic a little more at some point, but for now, credit to him for when to waive your right to silence, which, as we say, is not legal advice, and really is, speaking of novelty, is just a novelty thing that might have the effect of appealing to the better nature of police, who do, of course, in these situations, have the power to decide whether to actually press charges and pursue you through the court system. In Australia, at least, this is the case. So, of course, it's important to be aware of the laws, customs, practices of the police in your own jurisdiction, and whether these tactics that we've talked about during this podcast more broadly are likely to dig yourself into a deeper hole. What I've done and what Jeremy has done here is mainly object to the laws themselves, rather than saying what the police must do in these situations as a matter of legality. I am, of course, a strong proponent of the idea that officers of the law must actually enforce the law, but at the same time, those officers are the first line of defence in actually judging whether a law has been broken. It seems to me like telling an officer, quote, "You look like my lesbian nana," end quote, is not, for example, hate speech. But that's open to interpretation, and the police are welcome to interpret whether or not that constitutes hate speech. As everything I've said here now, today, in this episode, is likewise not hate speech in the jurisdiction of New South Wales. Even if we do have hate crime and hate incident laws that the New South Wales police say they take very seriously. That's what they say on their website. The actual law in the jurisdictions under which I am personally subject right now come in two forms: the state law in New South Wales and the federal law of Australia. The state law in New South Wales is the Anti-Discrimination Act 1977, New South Wales, which was amended in 1989. And that amendment meant that New South Wales became the first state to make it, quote, unlawful for a person by a public act to incite hatred towards, serious contempt for, or severe ridicule of a person or group on the grounds of race, end quote. The amendment also created a criminal offence for, quote, inciting hatred, contempt or severe ridicule towards a person or group on the grounds of race by threatening physical harm towards people or their property or inciting others to threaten such harm. Homosexual vilification is also prohibited under the umbrella of the Anti-Discrimination Act, end quote. Federally, I am also subject to Section 474.17 of the Criminal Code, which makes it an offence to, quote, use a carriage service such as the internet in a manner which reasonable persons would regard as menacing, harassing or offensive, end quote, which is rather broad and also open to interpretation. There are also laws of precedent federally that come to bear on this, but the law itself is of course a complex topic, and this podcast is one about philosophy and science in the main. It's not a podcast about the legal system. Perhaps one day I'll get a lawyer on to talk about all of this. But as I say at this point in every episode, until next time, bye-bye.